We are now well into our APEST series. We've done our introduction. We did that twice. We've done the gift of the apostle. And Andy last week did the gift of the prophet. So, quick quiz for you. What's next? Eric, the evangelist. Yes, we're going to do the gift of the evangelist. In our introduction, we looked at where these APEST gifts come from. We looked at the fact that I believe, fully persuaded, that they are a part of God's nature. I talked about how these gifts come straight out of God's nature, how his fingerprints in creation placed these gifts of APEST, and they wove them into the very fabric of creation. God, the creator, was the founder, the inventor, the visionary that pioneered a new thing, namely earth and mankind. That's fairly apostolic. God's holiness, his nature towards injustice and unrighteousness, his heart for his creation, those are the things that the prophetic deal with. God's saving, redeeming nature and desire to see all mankind come into relationship with him speaks very much like what I'm about to speak on, the evangelist. God's love for people, his desire to know them and be known by them. That desire to be their God and us be his people. That speaks to the shepherd in him. God's wisdom, his openness to share that with us, the abilities he's given us to reason. That's the teacher. And as Alan Hirsch said, and I quoted this last time, and I've just quoted it, they are woven into creation. We discussed how the fall, like everything else, corrupted the APEST, that which God had placed in the world from the beginning. And that when Jesus came back, he reclaimed it. He redeemed it. He regenerated that which had been corrupted. And then he gave it back to us in the form that we're going through right now. I spoke about that first gift, the apostle, the sent one, the envoy, how they are custodians of the DNA of that which God has called them to build, to plant, to strengthen. When we talk about the apostolic, we are talking about sending and extending. Andy spoke last week and shared with us his thoughts on the next gift, the prophet. How it is the gift that reveals God's heart to us, continually giving a voice to God's heart, calling us back to it. And he suggested that the prophet is more about forth-telling than he is about foretelling. Drawing God's heart for the now out, rather than foretelling what the future might be. There's an element of that in the prophetic. But the prophetic is about God's heart. It's about what burdens God's heart and making it sure that we hear that and that we're called to that. I've taglined the prophetic as questioning and embodying. Questioning the status quo, questioning what's going on right now. Is it what God's heart is for the moment? And then prophets, you're called to embody that. Not just talk it, but to walk it. This morning I'm going to look at the gift of the evangelist. But before I do that, I want to make a point. I want to make sure that we've got it in our minds that there is a correct framework for everything that we're saying and teaching. If you have your Bibles with you, would you please open them to our key Bible passage for this series? Ephesians 4, verses 1 to 16. I'll wait for the flicking over of pages to stop. If you've got it on your phone, pull your phone out. If you want a Bible, there's some at the back. Let's read Ephesians chapter 4, verse 1 to 16 together. I therefore, a prisoner for the Lord, urge you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling to which you have been called, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love, eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. There is one body and one Spirit, just as you were called to the one hope that belongs to your call. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is over all and through all and in all. But grace was given to each one of us according to the measure of Christ's gifts. Therefore it says, when he ascended on high, he led a host of captives, and he gave gifts to men. In saying he ascended, what does it mean? But that he also descended into the lower regions, the earth. He who ascended is the one who also ascended far above all the heavens, that he might fill all things. And he gave the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the shepherds and teachers, to equip the saints for the work of ministry, for building up the body of Christ, until we all attain to the unity of the faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God, to mature manhood, to the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ. What a mouthful. So that we may no longer be children, tossed to and fro by the waves and carried about by every wind of doctrine, by human cunning, by craftiness in deceitful schemes. Rather, speaking the truth in love, we are to grow up in every way into him who is the head, into Christ, from whom the whole body, joined and held together by every joint with which it is equipped, when each part is working properly, makes the body grow so that it builds itself up in love. I want to draw your attention to a part of that passage. Paul starts off this whole kind of chapter with I therefore, a prisoner for the Lord, urge you to walk in a manner worthy of your calling, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love, eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. There is one body and one Spirit, just as you were called to the one hope that belongs to your call. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is over all and through all and in all. Paul starts by telling us we need to walk in a worthy manner to the way that we're being called. Before he gets into the gifts, the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, shepherds, teachers, he talks about character. And that is the framework, that's the healthy framework that everything that we talk about in this series has to be contained within. Character. God is far more interested in your character than he is in your gifting. I urge you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love, eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. Paul hits us with that truth, that we all need to put on the character of Jesus. If you think you can be a prophet in this place and be arrogant and be self-centered and be argumentative, then the door's there. If you think you can be an apostle in this place and be all about yourself and be all about your ministry and not care about the unity of your brothers and sisters, then the door works both ways. If you think you can be an evangelist in this place and be on your own, out there, doing your own thing, saying whatever you want, not caring about that which God has placed you under, the leaders and the accountability, not wanting to be a part of this family, wanting to be outside of it, then the door works both ways. As has been said to me on many occasions, don't let it hit you on the way out. You see, we have to frame these gifts. We have to frame ourselves within the boundaries of character, of humility, of patience, of love, of unity with our brothers and sisters. If you think you can pull people down because you've got some gifting, guys, you've got it wrong. You've got no gifting whatsoever. Because you haven't got the Spirit of God in you. Because that isn't what God does. God encourages, God builds up. God looks for the reasons why we can rather than the reasons why we can't be in unity with each other. That doesn't mean that we throw the Bible away. No, it is our standard. And we hold to it. But we don't use that to beat people over the heads, to tear people apart. No, we use it to build them up. Jesus says quite clearly in the Word that God disciplines his children. But he never disciplines in a way that drags them down and puts his foot on their neck. He disciplines in a way that will build them up. Will draw them back to him. Will draw them back into the fold. See, there's a word that is used about Jesus that some of us need to learn in this place. In fact, we all need to learn it. We all need to grab hold of it. And that is grace. We don't deserve it, but we've got it. God's riches at Christ's expense. Show a bit of grace to your brothers and your sisters. Show them a bit of God's riches from your life that you don't deserve, but you had it at God's expense, at Christ's expense. Show them a bit of grace. You see, that's the framework for what we're teaching. It's not so much about the gifts, although the gifts are important. It's about the character of the people that those gifts are going to be bestowed upon. And I'm going to major on it, and I'm going to keep pushing it into us. Because I'm not about creating an arrogant church. I'm not about creating selfish disciples. He doesn't. God don't like that. Amen. Let's be a people that get this right. That understand that God's more interested in our character than he is in our giftings. That grace covers over a multitude of sins. And that I can be Mick's friend. Even when he naffs me off. I can be his brother. Why? Because I've got this big dose of grace for Mick. Because he's a bearer of God's image. Because he's God's son. And because he's got a big dose of grace for me when I naff him off. God looks at hearts, at motives, at character. And he judges us on those things, not on our giftings or our abilities. Paul re-emphasizes this truth to us, highlighting character before he goes into how Jesus is going to gift us, the church, with the Apex gifts. While I was thinking about this and writing this sermon, the story of Samson popped into my mind. For those that don't know that story, Samson was gifted by God a great strength, a physical strength. And he was given a mandate to protect and to lead the Israelites when it came to one of their enemies, the Philistines. For a time, Samson did that. There was a covenant involved with his hair growing. But for a time, Samson did what he was asked to do. He used his great strength to protect and to lead. But you see, Samson's issue wasn't his gift. Samson's issue was his character. He became a selfish person. He used his gift for his own well-being. He got himself all messed up and corrupted. He looked after his own pleasures rather than what God had asked him to do with the gift he'd been given. And eventually, he loses his strength, has his eyes plucked out, and ends up in prison. Ends up as a trophy for the Philistines, as a warning to all the Israelites, don't mess with us. It wasn't until his character started to be redeemed and regenerated, where he started to realize that he needed to repent, that his strength returned to him. And he was able to do what he was called to do. In one last mighty act, pushing apart the pillars of the Philistine temple, he ended God's enemies of the Philistines at that time. And he did what he was called to do. But his character was the thing that caused him his issues. God reminded me of that when I was writing this, that he's interested in our character. You can say a lot of harsh things if your character and your heart are right, because people understand where they come from, because people can accept that, because they know you want the very best for them. But if your character's not right, your message will never be heard. The other thing that I want to draw our attention to is that number one. Paul says it over and over and over again. There is one God, one faith, one baptism. Paul is stating here that we are one. We are equal. We need each other. In fact, turn to the person next to you and behind you and tell them, I need you. Turn to the person the other side of you and in front of you and tell them, I need you. If you are a person that thinks you don't need anybody, then people, you are in the wrong church. Because you do need everybody. You need those around you, even those you don't really like that much. They might just be your grace growers. You see, we're a part of a body. And every part of the body needs to function for the whole body to work. Why did I say all that? Well, I want to emphasize to us, as Paul did to the Ephesians, that the right framework for the Apex gifts, the way they will work correctly and impact the most is if our characters are right. Or dare I say it, if our characters are righteous. As a church, we've put a lot of effort into evangelism, and that's because we are called to be witnesses for Jesus. We are all called to be witnesses, to make disciples. Charles Spurgeon said this: "Have you no wish for others to be saved?" This is a bit hard to take. "Then you're not saved yourself. Be sure of that." That's not Dan Jarvis saying that. That's Charles Spurgeon. Possibly one of the greats when it comes to evangelism and Bible teaching. The whole church needs to be involved in this mission of sharing the gospel message. We're all called to be witnesses. We're all called to have an evangelistic stream to who we are. Not all people are called to be evangelists, and I'll explain that in a moment. But we're all called to be witnesses. We should all be ready to give a reason for the hope that is within us. The evangelist, as a role, as a function, as a person, is defined by the 5Q team. Remember that the 5Q team is the teaching material that us as leaders have gone through or are going through. It's what we're using and what we're drawing from, as well as other sources. So the evangelist, as defined by the 5Q team, is this: the evangelist function involves the proclamation of the good news at the core of the church's message. Evangelism is therefore all about the core message and its reception in the hearts of people and cultures. The evangelist is the storyteller, the all-important recruiter to the cause, the naturally infectious person who is able to enlist people into what God is doing in and through the church. They put a tagline on the evangelistic as recruiting and connecting. Let's look at for a moment at 2 Corinthians 5, verse 18 to 20. I'll read this, but it's 2 Corinthians 5, 18 to 20 if you want to check me out later. All this is from God, who reconciled us to himself through Christ and gave us the ministry of reconciliation, that God was reconciling the world to himself in Christ, not counting people's sins against them. And he has committed to us the message of reconciliation. We are therefore Christ's ambassadors, as though God were making his appeal through us. We implore you, on Christ's behalf, be reconciled to God. We are all called to be witnesses. We are all Christ's ambassadors. And we all have a ministry of reconciliation. Not division, but reconciliation. We're all called to try to reconcile, to bring that hope, that reconciliation into other situations, into other people's situations. Remember the framework: love, patience, unity, peace. That's what we as Christians, as followers of Jesus, are all called to do. You want to know what your calling is? The first part of it is to be a witness where you are. Maybe in your workplace, maybe in your family, maybe in your neighborhood, maybe as you're shopping. It is to be a witness for Jesus, a witness of the hope that you have in you because of the sacrifice and the gift that he's given to you, salvation. But the evangelist, or those who have this gifting, this bent in them, they will embody this in a far more intense and holistic way. I'm not an evangelist. I know that. It's far from my gifting. And I make no secret of that. I am not an evangelist. However, just like Paul said to Timothy, do the work of an evangelist. I do the work of an evangelist because I'm called to in leadership. But it's not my gifting. It's not where I'm comfortable. Marie, on the other hand, she is an out-and-out evangelist. She would never get on a stage and preach a message. But put her in a room with non-Christians, and it won't be long before they know the testimony of God's goodness. It won't be long before Marie's sharing with them that they can have that too. When we did the APES testing, it kind of told me something I already knew. I'm not an evangelist. It told me something else that I already knew, that Marie is. Her score for evangelism was off the chart. She was really gutted that all the other ones were like 1s and 2s, yet that one was really big. I was like, Bab, no, you just know who you are. You walk in your lane. And she walks really well in it. Don't tell her I bigged her up, by the way. She already has enough problems with you guys clapping her when she doesn't notice this. But you see, because I'm not an evangelist, I know that I need to call in evangelists. I need to connect us with evangelists. Hence why Mark Greenwood is a part of who we are. Hence why we have a relationship with him. Because I saw a gap that needed to be filled. I saw that there needed to be an equipping of you guys as the church. You needed somebody who could stand up here and speak with the authority of somebody that does it day in, day out. And train you as evangelists. And build you up and build that confidence in evangelism. I can do that to a degree, but I can't do it as well as an evangelist can do it. Because that's what they're called to do. Not only are they called to go out and evangelize, to share the gospel of Jesus, but they're called to equip others in that same thing. That's what these gifts are for the building up of the body, for the equipping of the saints, to bring us all to maturity and the full stature of Jesus. We want to be reflections of the greatest evangelist, of Jesus. See, I'm okay with where my gaps are because I'm a fairly aware leader or person. And I see some of those weaknesses. And I'm quite happy to bring in and draw in the gifts that are needed. That's actually part of the apostolic calling on my life. To build the structures, to make the space, to create the opportunity, to have the vision, to hold on to the DNA of what God has called us to do here at Flame. And to do everything I possibly can to make that happen. To co-labor with Jesus as he builds his church. That's what APES should look like. Apostles, prophets, evangelists, shepherds and teachers working together. To build up the church, to equip the church within that framework of unity, of peace, of patience, of love. What else would be a trait of an evangelist? Well, evangelists are the top recruiters. I didn't like that wording when I wrote it, but it's so true. Evangelists, if we look at them from a worldly perspective, they are the recruitment agents for the church. They're the ones that go out and tell people about this great place that people can belong. This great God that people can know. this new ability, lifestyle, whatever you want to call it, that people can have. They are the salespeople of the gospel. That sounds really bad to say that, but that's what evangelists are. They're the salespeople. They're the recruiters. They're the storytellers. They're the people that share the gospel in such a way that it connects with people's hearts, with their situations, with their circumstances. And there is a grace and a blessing upon an evangelist that when they share that gospel message, there'll be a response. Not every time that I share a gospel message, the people put their hands up and say, yeah, I want to be a Christian. Yeah, I want to know Jesus. I find that really difficult because I'm not an evangelist. My brother Aaron, however, he has an evangelistic calling on his life. And he could get in a room with a load of Eskimos and he could tell them that Jesus gave them snow and they'd accept that and they'd love it and they'd grab hold of it. And before you know it, they'd all be Christians. They will have all put their hands up, not because they're cold, but because they want to know whatever it is he's talking about. Because there's an evangelistic gifting on his life. But you see, he can't just do it on his own. Because if he does, then there'll be lots of people coming in, but it'll be like a turnstile at the back because discipleship never happens. Because people are never loved and cared for by the shepherds. Because they're not really hearing God's heart because the prophets are quiet. Or they're not being taught the Bible in the depth with the passion that they need to be taught it. They're not being given the abilities to think for themselves because the teachers don't exist. And the DNA of the message of God, the reason for his church, the reason for brothers and sisters, the reason for family and community would never get out there because the apostles don't exist in there. Evangelists can't do this on their own. They need the other gifts to work alongside them, with them. They need to work alongside the other gifts. It's the importance of having every major organ in the church working properly. A guy called Malcolm Gladwell says, evangelists, they have a special gift for bringing the world together. You see, evangelists can connect us with the world like nobody else can. They can bridge the gap between churchy life and life out there. We're all called to be witnesses. Don't hear me tell you anything different. We're all called to have an evangelistic stream. I'm talking about the gift of evangelist to the church. These people do what some of us struggle to do with ease, in a much fuller and holistic way than we ever could. We have to work hard at it. They breeze through it. Put them in a room of non-Christians and they love it. Put them in a pub where the world is just, it's just there, and evangelists love it. Put them in a club where the music's going and the drugs are there and everything in the world of the world is just in your face. Evangelists love it. They actually don't particularly like being in church because they think all of us just sit on our pews. I'm stereotyping and I shouldn't do that. Romans 10:14-15 poses us the question, which I believe evangelists are a big part of God's answer to. How then can they call on the one they have not believed in? And how can they believe in the one of whom they have not heard? And how can they hear without someone preaching to them? And how can anyone preach unless they are sent? As it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who bring good news. Mark 16:15 makes evangelism a clear directive from Jesus. He said to them, go into all the world and preach the gospel to all creation. I'm coming into land. The evangelists have a grace placed upon them, a gift placed upon them to proclaim the gospel in a relevant yet authentic, biblically integral way. They connect the Bible's message of the gospel, Jesus, with the circumstances and the lives of the people that they talk to. Not only do they do it in action with their good works, but there is an element of an evangelist that has to preach the gospel, has to speak it out. Good works go so far, but there is power in our words. We all know the negative effect our words can have on people and on ourselves. An evangelist knows the positive effects of telling the story of the gospel. What are the things that maybe we should look out for in ourselves and other people with regards to this gifting? Maybe something's hiding in you. A person that recruits for a cause, makes clear the message of salvation, communicates passionately, needs others to hear and respond. Their core issue, everything that they think about is conversion, coming to faith. How can we do that? How can we make it easier? How can we get more people involved with seeing people come to know Jesus? That consumes those who are evangelists. They have a perspective that sees people as souls that need faith, that need Jesus. They can personalize and contextualize the message of God's love. And they are motivated by seeing people move towards Christ. Those are some of the things that maybe we should look for in ourselves. Because it may just be that you have an evangelist gift brewing inside you. But there are signs of immaturity in this gift, indicators that we need a little bit more work with God. Evangelists can be insecure, unhealthy need for affirmation. They can have a lack of deep relationships because they move from one to the next. Everyone's a project. The project to get them to Jesus. Not a bad project. They can be pragmatists. If it works, it must be right. As a teacher and as a leader of a church, that is just horrendous. But it's so true. Not everything that works is right. The ends don't justify the means sometimes. I'm not saying all the time. They can become resentful or neglectful of those inside the church because their focus is on out there. It's on the lost. They can be all about the short-term gain over the long-term progress. They can mistake decisions for Christ for discipleship. And an evangelist who's not quite got it right yet will be very numbers driven. When an evangelistic leader dominates the church or the organization of which they're a part of, the organization will have an obsession with numerical growth. Will create dependence on charismatic leadership. It's all about personality. The more charismatic you are, the more people you draw. And will tend to lack theological breadth and depth because they're interested in one thing and one thing only. To see a decision made for Jesus. But let me remind you, like I remind us all the time, we are not called to make converts. We are called to go and make disciples of the nations, teaching them to obey all that God has commanded. That's why we need the full APEST's influence here at the Flame. That is why we want to explore the APEST together. Look to strengthen and exercise each of those gifts here within us so that we can equip the saints for the work of ministry, for building up the body of Christ, until we all attain to the unity of the faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God, to mature manhood, to the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ. That's why we need the APEST. That's why we need every major organ in the church working properly, so that the body can be full and complete and do what God has called us to do. Want to get an idea of where your APEST giftings might lie? Why not see me about doing the APEST test? Yes, it costs £10. But it might reveal some things that you already know. But it might reveal some things you didn't realise. The reason why you see the world in the way that you see the world. And actually looking at the things that the different gifts can get wrong, the immature side of the gifts can be really helpful. Because it gives us something to work on. Oh, I'm numbers driven. That's because I haven't got my head around the fact that if just one person comes to know Jesus and is discipled properly, that's what I was put here to do. One evangelist brought Billy Graham to the Lord. Billy Graham went on to bring hundreds of thousands, millions to know Jesus. If that evangelist who started it all off had been immature in his gifting, he wouldn't have bothered with the one. He would have been disappointed. If you're interested in learning about evangelists, then why not Google people like George Jeffreys, Reinhard Bonnke, Daniel Calendar, Nathan Morris, George Whitfield, Billy Graham. I've been doing my MIT over the last few days, and weeks and months. I've been doing it for years, just in case anybody's looking from the MSB board. I haven't left it to the last minute because I don't do things like that. But one of the things that I've been reading about was George Jeffreys. And some of the evangelistic campaigns that man did. Did you know in 1930 that George Jeffreys came to Birmingham? And he set up in an ice rink. And over the period of time that the crusade went on, 250,000 people came to that ice rink, heard the gospel. 10,000 of them came to know Jesus, made decisions for Jesus. 1,000 of them at that moment were baptized. And that changed Birmingham's atmosphere. Elim has a rich history of evangelism. It's based on evangelism. It was planted and created and started by an evangelist who pulled together the Elim band, a group of people who had different giftings. And then a movement was born.